Morning, gents. So this is a little bit of an upgrade on my revision voice notes. My class will know that I send last push voice notes through when you are revising for a paper. And so this holiday, I decided to make you a series of PowerPoint presentations to assist you in your revision process. So let's just have a look at the resources that you might need to study for paper one. The Beryl Lutrin and Marcel Pincus English Handbook and Study Guide is always a good foundation for grammar. However, if you don't have access to it at this stage, there's also a Survival Guide to English, which is a free PDF document that I will circulate on the group, and you can use that to study your grammar fundamentals. Of course, for me, the really important thing for any matric paper is that you are practicing past papers and familiarizing yourself with how they ask the questions. I would always recommend that you study at least 3 past papers before you go in and write an exam. And so today and during the course of this week, I'll be revisiting the English Home Language Paper 1, November 2024 paper with you. So here's just a sneak peek of some of the information that you might find inside that Survival Guide to English. You can have a look at your basic parts of speech, various definitions that you might need to tackle the grammar course, and a really useful little pronoun chart where you can see subject and object pronouns for your active and passive voice, the difference between a possessive adjective and a possessive pronoun, reflexive pronouns, those of course being pronouns that end in self, and then you can play with that information and manipulate it to help you answer questions that you come across in question 5. In an additional note, I'd just like to bring to your attention that I usually recommend to my students that they start each question on a new page, because that's what the examiners want, and then also that they start paper 1 with question 5. In question 5, it can really ease you into the paper because either you know the answer or you don't. Then you move on to question 4 and 3, your visual literacy. And this is a section where I find boys in particular tend to score better than in the textual or more text-based sections. And so I'd recommend that you do questions 3 and 4 next. And then, of course, your summary, which is basically guaranteed marks if you can identify your focus area correctly. I always recommend that you tackle question 1 last. There are 2 reasons for this. The first is that question 1 is very text heavy, and so it's better to tackle it once you are into this thing called English, once your brain has been thinking in English for a while, and once you've already analyzed the questions for questions 2 to 5, because I just find that then your brain is a little bit sharp, more sharp. The second thing is that your comprehension is obviously very text heavy, and those last few questions in the comprehension are very higher order thinking questions, your level 4 and 5 questions, and they might throw you off, and they also take quite long to answer. So in terms of the timing of your paper, I always find it best to leave that question 1 until last, because if you don't get to the last few questions, you're going to lose proportionately fewer marks than in your visual literacy and your language, where you either knew the answer or you didn't, and you actually have the skills to grapple with those questions. So leave the comprehension for last, and strategically you'll lose out on less marks. All right, let's jump into today's challenge, question 5. All right, so let's get started with the paper that you're busy with. That's the November 2024 paper. Please note that it's going to go quite slowly because I'm also going to be giving you some general language tips as we go along. All right, so let's start by having a look at our first question. 5.1 says refer to line 1. Remember that line reference is so important for you to get the correct answer. Then you'll immediately see that we've got a focus area or a buzzword here, and that focus area is synonym. All right, so if we look at our buzzwords, synonym and antonym, all right, a synonym starts with an S, and so it's a word with a similar meaning, whereas an antonym starts with an A, which sounds different to ah, and ah are opposites. So when they ask us for antonyms, we're looking for a word with the opposite meaning. But this time round, they've given us the nice basic one. They want a synonym, a word with a similar meaning. And of course, the word that they're wanting a similar meaning of is returns. But have a look at this, gents. They want a meaning for the word in context. So in context means that they want you to go and read the sentence that the word is in, and they want you to find a word with a similar meaning that matches that sentence. Much like in paper 2 when we're doing our poetry, and they always give us a line reference, and they want the answer to refer specifically to that line. So let's read the sentence. A relatively small investment in travel now yields major returns for the rest of your life. So in terms of the word investment, we want a synonym for a return. So what is a return on investment, guys? It's a profit. Because if we're thinking about investments, we're thinking about money. So a return is something that we get back, and one word for that is a profit. So you could answer profits, you could answer rewards, you could answer results, or even something like benefits. The gym guys might think of the word gains. When you give something out and you get something back, those are gains. So any of those words will earn you your mark. All right. We move to 5.2, and it says rewrite the expression figure out from line 2 in standard English. So we want figure out and we want standard English. All right. So let's just ask ourselves what standard English is. All right. You may be familiar with the concept of register. All right. Register is the level of formality with which we speak. And over the years, when we've gone through the different kinds of register with you, we've gone through slang and colloquialism and jargon. All right. So if I start at the bottom of my list here, jargon is the very formal English that we might use in a particular context. Like if you're visiting the doctor, you might get a prescription and a diagnosis. Those are examples of formal register. All right. Then in terms of informal register, we've got colloquialism and slang that are very popular options that we often have to look at. Now, colloquialism is an example of informal language that we are exposed to in a specific locality or area. And a way to test it is that older people would also know what colloquialism means. And of course, the famous South African example is to talk about having a braai. All right. Colloquialism can sometimes be borrowed from another language, but it's not a compulsory aspect of colloquialism. The compulsory aspect of colloquialism is that they're informal words that most other people would know the meaning of, even older people, and they're specific to one locality. So in one region, we use a word as colloquialism. In South Africa, words like braai and lap would be examples of colloquialism, whereas in Australia, a word like Barbie would be an example of a colloquialism. And in this case, it's not the doll, it's a barbecue, right? So let's go back to the question now. They're wanting us to discuss register in terms of standard English. Standard English means the formal English that you might come across in the dictionary. Okay, so to figure something out is a little bit informal or colloquial. All right, and if we look at line 2, it says if you're planning a trip, one of the first things to figure out is how much money you can spend. And when they want standard English, they want slightly more formal English for figuring out. So if you're figuring something out, what are you doing? You're trying to understand it. You're trying to understand, to find out, to determine, to consider, to calculate. So those are all more formal words that we can give for figure out. And I'm sure that this is quite a low-hanging fruit. Most of you know that to figure something out is to understand something. And if you had answered understand, you would have received your mark. All right. Let's go to the last one on the slide. Correct the pronoun error in paragraph 1. All right. And the question word here is correct, guys. Different to identify. Please always be aware of your question words, even in question 5. So when they tell you to identify something, they're wanting you to point out the mistake. And they're wanting you to show me this is what's wrong right here. This is what's wrong. Whereas when they tell you to correct the error, they're telling you that they want you to fix it. So the instruction here becomes quite important. And then if we look at our buzzword in the sentence, our buzzword is the pronoun error. Okay? Now let's make sure that we know the difference between a pronoun and a proper noun. A pronoun is a short word, and if we look at the prefix pro means for. Okay? So it stands for the noun. The pronoun stands in place of the noun. All right? So we're looking for words here like he and she and they and it. We're looking for words that stand in place of the noun. All right. And then a proper noun is different to a pronoun. And I find for some strange reason, students often mix these two up. A proper noun is proper. It is special. It is a noun that identifies something specific and that gives the special name to something. So a proper noun might be my name, Louise, or the name of a restaurant, McDonald's. And of course, proper nouns' importance is always shown by the fact that it is capitalized. All right. So know the difference between a proper noun and a pronoun. We're looking for a pronoun here, something that stands in place of the noun. All right. And so we are looking for words like you, words like me. There we see you again. And of course, here's a very interesting pronoun, the non-specific pronoun you. Okay, one. So when I'm being specific with a pronoun, I might tell you, you must study for your exam. But when I'm being general, I would say, one must study for their exam. So now I'm not pointing specific fingers anymore. I'm just making an abstract statement that's non-specific. One should always study for one's exams. Those two pronouns are quite different in that one is specific and the other one is general. And the intention in sentences could be different, all right? Now, the rule is that when you are using a particular pronoun, you've got to stick to your pronoun, right? You must stick to your pronoun. They must stick to their pronouns. I can't then say you must stick to one's pronoun because I've moved from specific to general. And so I've got a mismatched pronoun, all right? And that's exactly what's happening in this paper. If you're planning a trip, one of the first things to figure out is how much money you can spend. That first one is not being used as a pronoun. Do you see that? So it's not the error. But let's keep reading the paragraph. Every penny you spend on an investment in yourself and an investment in the world around one. Okay. So in this sentence, you'll see that we've got lots of yous and yourselves. Okay. So they are pronouns. And then suddenly we have the word one popping up. And that does not match you and yourself. All right. And so one should change to you. Every penny you spend on travel is an investment in yourself and an investment in the world around you. So there you go. We've corrected the pronoun error. There's a buzzword here called concord. And concord is subject-verb agreement. I'm not going to speak about it right now, but I'll speak about it towards the end of this presentation. Just keep in mind that concord is subject-verb agreement, because actually if you've studied your concord rules, you could also have answered 5.3, because mismatched pronouns are an example of breaking concord in a sentence where your subject and your verb don't agree anymore, but in this case, your pronouns don't agree anymore. Concord is agreement in a sentence, and we'll have a look at it later on in this presentation. All right, so as we pause and move to the next slide, let's just take a look at MAM's progress. I had told you that I want you to commit 15 minutes a day to studying, and this presentation at this point is already 15 minutes. So if you want to, you can stop right now. I do not mind if you stop right now. I've spoken to you about 3 different language concepts, very low-hanging fruit, where you can earn the answer. And if you want to stop right now, you can. If you've been getting naught for your language section, getting 3 out of 10 is much of an improvement on that. However, if you're really committed to your studies, I'd encourage you to listen for a little bit longer. You can also critique me as we go along. As I mentioned to you, this is my first video, and I don't think I'm becoming a YouTube star yet. I'm doing these awkward pauses in between slides. I'm struggling to find my hand on my camera, so you're reliant entirely on facial expression at this stage. My lighting also isn't great. I haven't done my hair and makeup, so I'm really not going to become a YouTube sensation yet, gents. But I do encourage you to listen further if studying is your goal. All right, so we're moving to 5.4, active and passive voice. Now, in terms of language, active and passive voice is really the high-end question that's really difficult to get right, okay? But I'm going to go through it because it's very common. Over the past 3 years, almost every single past paper has asked you to change a sentence from active to passive voice. 9 times out of 10, they ask you to change from active to passive voice. Occasionally, there'll be an exception where they'll ask you to change from passive to active. Now, let's just look at what these 2 concepts actually mean, all right? So, active sentence is the way a teacher taught you to speak in grade 1, okay? It's your subject, verb, object sentence. The boy kicked the ball, all right? The focus is on the actor and they're taking part in an activity. The boy is kicking the ball or the boy kicked the ball. Doesn't matter what tense you're taking part in. We're focusing on the actor, on the subject of the sentence. Of course, you should know, I hope, that most sentences in the English language are structured as subject, verb, and object, all right? SVO. So the passive voice then would be when we actually start focusing on the object of a sentence and we focus on the who or what is having something done to them. So the ball is being kicked by the boy. That is an example of a passive voice sentence because we start with the object, not the actor. All right. So we generally change from the active voice to the passive voice, and that's all I'm going to practice with you here today because I don't want to overcomplicate things. So when you're changing from active to passive voice, the first thing you need to do is identify the subject, the verb, and the object, SVO. Then you need to move the object to the subject's position. So your subject and your object need to swap. Okay. Then you need to use the auxiliary verb to be. Now you don't actually put in the words to be, but you put in a suitable auxiliary verb for that sentence. And I will show you an example of this in a moment. And then the last thing that you do is you move the original subject. So remember, we swapped subject and object. So the subject goes to the object's place, and we add in the word by. Remember, I said the ball was being kicked by the boy. So when we put the subject at the end of the sentence, we put by in front. Of course, this is English and there are always exceptions, and sometimes you don't have to put in by, for example, if it's by us, because then it's obvious who is taking on the action. But I don't want to look at that much complication today. Let's just look at this basic of swapping subject and object and then changing our verb, okay? Because after we've used the auxiliary verb, we have to change the main verb to its past participle. Sorry for scribbling all over the place here. I'm still getting the hang of this. We move the main verb to its past participle. So let's have a look at this sentence for illustration. Traveling expands your social connections to different people, rewrite the above sentence fragment in the passive voice. So we're doing the one where we swap subject and object and we add by to the subject. Quite easy. Okay, so let's identify the subject of the sentence fragment. The subject is traveling. And of course it's tricky because traveling there is serving as a gerund. It's serving as a noun. Traveling is your subject. Your action word, the important one, the one that's going to have to change, the one that the subject and your object are centered around, expands. Okay? Expands is your verb in the sentence, your doing word. And then your object, your social connections to different people. Your social connections is the direct object, but I won't go to advanced techniques like that today. I'm just going to show you that I've got S, I've got V, and I've got O. Now the first rule is swap S and O. So my sentence has to start with your social connections to different people. Now I've got to add in an auxiliary verb. All right. Step number 3 is add in an auxiliary verb. So expands needs a verb added, a helping verb added to connect it to the beginning of the sentence. Your social connections to different people. What would we say there? What word would we put in? Would we put in is or would we put in are? Your social connections to different people are, all right? Because people and connections are plural, and so we need to put in the auxiliary verb are. Your social connections to different people are. Now, can we say are expands? No, that's broken English. We need to fix it. Your social connections to different people are expanded by traveling. I've added in by and I've put the object at the end. So are expanded by traveling. Now what, gents, if you didn't know how to change expands to expanded? What do you do? Well, what they've told us to do is we change the main verb to its past participle. And this is the point where I just quickly want to ignore active and passive voice, and I want to go back to what past participles are, because this is something that you can study. So if we just quickly diverge and we talk about past participle, a past participle is basically a verb that ends in ed because we've made it past tense. So if we take the word expand and we try and turn it into a past participle, we say expanded. My waist expands, my waist expanded. Past participle changes it to the past tense, right? And when we're changing from active to passive voice, our verb always has to change to a past participle. Now, of course, in English, there are always exceptions. And so we have what we call irregular verbs, all right? So there are some verbs that are irregular verbs. These are verbs that do not follow that rule where simply adding ed is going to make the word a past participle. And the good news is that past participles that are irregular often come up in past papers and you can study them. So if you go and have a look at your survival guide to English, it will be able to teach you what a past participle is if you didn't understand my explanation, and it will also give you a list of irregular verbs where you can study your irregular verbs, where when we change them to past tense or to past participle, then the rules change and we can't just add ed, we actually have to do something different. And if you look at the very last word there, write, the past participle version of write is written. And so I'm quickly going to use this verb written to do one more example of changing from active to passive voice with you. So for active and passive voice, I've got the sentence, the teacher writes the note. So let's start out by identifying subject, verb, and object. Our subject obviously is the person doing the action, so that is the teacher, all right? The teacher in this instance is our subject. Then we need to identify our verb or our doing word, and our verb or our action word is writes. Whoever thought that your grade 1 teacher saying doing word would still be useful in matric? That's our verb. And then the object is who or what the action is being done to. It is the note. The note is our object. So to change from active to passive voice, identify subject, verb, and object, and then swap subject and object. So we've got to swap the teacher and the note. And we've got to start our sentence with the note. When we've started our sentence by writing the note, we've now got to change our verb. We've got to add an auxiliary verb. So how do we agree, or how do we match the note and writes? We put in is. The note is. The note is writes. That's not correct. Our verb has to change to a past participle. And writes is an irregular verb, and so we can't add ed. We can't say righted. Normally you just add ed, like expand, expanded. But in this case, writes becomes written, because it is an irregular verb on our list in our study guide. So the note is written by the teacher. The note is written by the teacher. How have I changed from active to passive voice? I've swapped my subject and my object, and I've fixed the verb by adding in a helping verb. The helping verb is, and by changing to the past participle, which in this case is written. The note is written by the teacher. And gents, here's a hack. If you have a look at marking guidelines, you will see that the mark is often awarded for active and passive voice at the exact point of the verb. So where you add in your helping verb and you change to your past participle, that's where the mark is allocated. If you can fix your verbs correctly, but you mess up sentence order a little bit, you're still going to get at least one of your 2 marks for active and passive voice. So I'm sipping my tea and I'm moving right along to a really, really important section. And this is a section that I call low-hanging fruit. Now you're going to hear this phrase over the next few months until you literally want to vomit when you hear it. What do teachers mean when they say low-hanging fruit? They mean easy questions. They mean things that you can learn off by heart and repeat in an exam and get marks, all right? So in your learning subjects like business studies, it's going to be really easy. Your low-hanging fruit is going to be things where you have to identify a heading, and if you studied that heading, you get the mark done and dusted. In English, low-hanging fruit are questions that come up commonly over and over and over again. And in the grammar section, 2 such questions are redundancy and the function of the hyphen. Sorry, I forgot to switch to my highlighter. You know I'm an amateur here. So redundancy and give the function of the hyphen. These were the 2 lowest hanging fruit in this entire paper, all right? So we need to know what these focus areas or concepts are for us to be able to answer them. So if we look at buzzwords, let's quickly learn the meaning of the word redundancy if we did not previously know it. Okay, so redundancy means unnecessary repetition. My personal opinion is that English is easy. My means me. Personal refers to the self. Me and the self are the same thing. So my personal opinion is the easiest example in the world of redundancy. How do we correct or remove the redundancy? We remove one of the words that means the same thing. So I need to say my opinion or personally. My opinion is the easier one. My opinion is that blah, blah, blah. I've removed the redundancy because I've taken away that extra word with the same meaning, personally. All right. Now, I've made another rookie error in that they've told us to refer to paragraph 2 in question 5.5, and I forgot to copy it into my slide. So I'm just going to have to go back to my past paper on my phone. You'll see, gents, that I refer to my phone a lot, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that when you are studying. It's a good tip to put your phone onto airplane mode once you've opened your document or downloaded your video that you're studying, because that way notifications disappear and you're not going to be tempted to do other things or get distracted all the time. There's also this mode called Do Not Disturb that prevents your social media and WhatsApp notifications from coming up and keeps you focused. Sorry for my ADD moment. Let's move to removing the redundancy in paragraph 2. So I'm going to read until I find 2 words that mean the same thing. Please read with me. To start with, traveling expands your social connections to different people. Connecting to various other cultures. Wait a minute. Various other. Give me various options. Give me other options. Those 2 words mean exactly the same thing, gents, and there is our answer. To answer this, we need to say connecting to various cultures or connecting to other cultures. And removing one of those words and writing the phrase down will earn you your mark. Why is 5.5 a low-hanging fruit? Because redundancy means the same word in 2 different ways, and you've just got to try your best to search for it. Here's an interesting little nugget of information. When they designed the marking guidelines for this paper, they looked at the idea of, just give me a second, they looked at the idea of the second perspective, and those who had removed or changed the idea around perspective were also credited. So sometimes in the marking guidelines, things are found that the examiner didn't notice, and they do credit those, all right, if it is correct and it can be substantiated with the text. Let's move to 5.6. 5.6 is the easiest mark in this paper, and I want all of you to earn this mark. Sorry, ma'am's phone is not on Do Not Disturb mode, and I've just spoken about it. Next time I make a video, I'll be sure to put it on Do Not Disturb mode. So there I've learnt my lesson. Sorry for rejecting the call, whoever that was. All right, so give the function of the hyphen in line 8. Guys, this is the lowest hanging fruit in this entire paper, and if you used to get 0 out of 10 for paper 1, I expect you to get 1 out of 10 now. All right, so a hyphen is a little line. And often when I ask kids the difference between a hyphen and a dash, they tell me that the hyphen is shorter than the dash. When you do cat, a hyphen is shorter than the dash. But in English, that's not the difference. In English, the difference is that a hyphen is used inside a word to join 2 words, and the fancy name for this is to form a compound word. If you tell me that you are joining 2 words in the exam, wrong, 0. But if you tell me that a hyphen is forming a compound word, you will get your mark. If the word compound is there, you will get your mark. That's it. It's as easy as that. Okay? So please, 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 when they tell you give the function of the hyphen, don't even look at the word. Just write down it forms a compound word, and there you will get your mark. If you want to go and look at the word, you can go and look at it. You can verify that it's correct, and you can even tell me whether it's a compound noun or a compound adjective. But that's dangerous because then you might get it wrong. Whereas if you just say compound word, you're going to get your mark. Okay, so a hyphen is to form a compound word, and it's always inside a word. So it joins 2 words to form a compound word. All right. A dash, on the other hand, is to join 2 sections of a sentence, and we'll discuss that later in this segment. It's also a low-hanging fruit, but don't worry about it right now. Now, gents, while we are on the topic of low-hanging fruit, I know that we've earned the marks for 5.5 and 5.6, but I've just scolded you for saying, for those of you who tell me that a hyphen is used to shorten the word or to join 2 words. Okay, a hyphen used to join 2 words, not worth a mark. Learn your jargon. We spoke about jargon just now. A hyphen is to make a compound word. Now, for heaven's sake, let's quickly speak about an apostrophe. All right, because in the trial exam, I wanted to cry when you guys told me that an apostrophe is to shorten the word. Yes, I know that an apostrophe shortens a word. If we have the word do not and we say don't, we've taken letters out, we've shortened the word. But I cannot in any universe give you the mark for that, because this is English and we need to use jargon. And so when we're using an apostrophe to shorten the word that we are looking for is omission. For heaven's sake, stop writing shorten the word, write omission, and you will get your mark. When apostrophe is being used to show that we own something, Louise's PowerPoint, it's the PowerPoint belonging to me, then the word that you need to write is possession. So go to your study guide, learn the 2 times that we use an apostrophe, and study it and get the jargon right. That is a mark that you can all earn. Go and learn it right now. Pause this video, look for apostrophes in your study guide, and learn the difference between an apostrophe for omission and an apostrophe for possession. I don't want to say it out loud, but in English we never use apostrophes for plural. So don't embarrass yourself and write plural as the answer. If you guess omission or possession on an apostrophe question, you have a 50% chance of getting a mark. Right, as I move to the next slide, I'm putting my phone on Do Not Disturb, and then I'd also just like to warn you that there's another hack coming up shortly, so do stay tuned. All right, 5.7 gives you a fragment of a sentence, and then it says, explain why the word practices is used incorrectly in this sentence. Now, when you see practices spelt with an S, some of you would have been smiling all the way to the bank. And the reason I say this is because this is another wordplay question, and your grade 6 teacher probably taught you the difference between the 2 practices. So I'm just going to remind you, all right? Practice spelt with a C is a noun, all right? Whereas practice spelt with an S is a verb. And I really hope your grade 6 teacher taught you that, along with teaching you the difference between its and to and two and two, all those different twos, right? So practice spelt with a C is a noun, practice spelt with an S is a verb. And that is exactly what they're referring you to in this question. Explain why the word practices is used incorrectly in this sentence. Well, in the sentence, practices is the object of a sentence. It's supposed to be a noun, and they've given us the verb form. That might be a little difficult to earn in terms of marks, okay, because you have to give an explanation, but practice it. Practice spelled with a C is a common noun, and it's being used as a noun here, and they spelt it as a verb by mistake. However, 5.7.2 you could all earn. Replace practices with the correct word. All you need to do is go to that S and replace it with a C, and then you've got your mark. This is a really quick slide, gents. Let's just go to the buzzwords quickly. These buzzwords are all in your survival guide, but they're really important ones, and so I just want to revise them with you. What is a homonym? A homonym is a word that sounds the same, and it can even be spelt the same, but it can have different meanings in different contexts. So, for example, pass me the cricket bat, and there flies a bat. Cricket bat is a piece of sports equipment. There flies the bat is a little animal that will make me scream. So a homonym, the word sounds the same and it spells the same, but it has different meanings. Then we go to homophone. Homophone, think of a telephone. A telephone sounds, a telephone makes sounds. A telephone sounds the same, but it's spelt differently. Homophone, the word still sounds the same, but it's spelt differently and it has different meanings. Practice is an example of a homophone. And often what they do is they ask you to provide the homophone in a sentence in past papers. And then you've got to be creative. You've got to think of a word that's spelt the same but sounds differently and put it into a sentence. And then finally, malapropism. You guys would have seen this in the recent trial exam. Malapropism is actually a spelling mistake. It's a private school name for a spelling mistake, and it's a spelling mistake where we accidentally use a similar sounding word and it becomes funny. All right? Please accept my invite to the matric dance. That is broken English. I'm supposed to say, please accept my invite to the matric dance. And so when I used accept instead of accept, it's funny because now you're an exception, you're not accepting, and it's example of a malapropism. Unfortunately, that malapropism often has to do with how regularly you read, because you need the vocab to be able to to be able to spot the mistake. Split the mistake, spot the mistake, similar sounding words spelt differently. There's another example of a malapropism. Yeah, let's go to my next slide for the hack that I offered you. All right, I made a mess up and I hope that I haven't destroyed everything, but I'm going to hope for the best. So here's my hack. Lots of you have used ChatGPT or Gemini AI or Meta AI to try and cheat in a test or to write you a literature essay or a creative essay and you've been busted. But did you know that when you're practicing past papers in the safety of your own room, it's actually very useful to use AI to look up the answers, okay? So I'm on Gemini on this screen, and I haven't cheated. I haven't typed in the paragraph and typed in the question and bam, I get the answer. I get 100%, but I can never do it in an exam because I don't have my phone on me. I've actually used AI productively. So I've got a question on a homophone. I don't know what a homophone is. I know these concepts confuse me. And so I talk to Gemini and I say, provide easy definitions for homonym, homophone, and malapropism with one example of each. And Bob's your uncle. It gives me a nice, easy explanation, and I can try and use Gemini to understand it. Now, instead of going through the tedious process of learning ma'am's whole study guide, I'm just learning key concepts coming up in past papers. And did you know that 7 out of 10 times the questions in a paper have already been in a past paper? I've analyzed it over and over and over again. And 7 out of 10 questions every year in question 5 have come up in a previous paper. So if you practice 3 past papers and you use Gemini to teach you the concepts as they come up, you're teaching yourself in a targeted fashion instead of studying ma'am's whole grammar book, and you're saving yourself hours. So please use AI to help you learn these grammar concepts. If you still don't understand the concept after you've looked at the memo, type in the prompt. Please explain to me the difference between practice with a C and practice with an S, and then it will give you a more detailed answer. So there's my hack, gents. Here is my last slide for the day. Well done if you're still with me. I know that 43 minutes is hectically boring, and you've done well if you've made it to an hour of studying today. And the title of my last slide is Study and It Becomes Predictable. Like I mentioned when I was showing you how to use AI to study, 7 out of 10 of the questions that I find in question 5 have come up in a past paper over the last 3 to 5 years. And so the more you get familiar with the concepts that are buzzwords, concepts that are popular at the time, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to score at least 4 out of 10 on your exam at the end of the year when it comes to question 5. You're always going to get the low-hanging fruit because they're there. So let's look at what's predictable on this last slide, gents. On this last slide, the word concord error is predictable and the word dash is predictable. Okay, so let's look at 5.8.1, correct the concord error in the above sentence. Now, I've already mentioned concord error earlier on with regard to pronouns. So please be aware that if you're going to study nothing else today, go to that survival guide and study concord errors, study subject-verb agreement, because it comes up over and over again, and it can come up in two forms, either in terms of marrying the subject and the verb, or in terms of marrying pronouns. And the notes are right there in the study guide. All right. So, a concord error is when subject and verb do not match. A concord error is most commonly used in South Africa when we make fun of Afrikaans-speaking people. I are wearing a jean pant. That's a very common stereotype. I are wearing a jean pant in an Afrikaans accent. What's it supposed to be? It's supposed to be, I am wearing jeans, or I am wearing pants. Jean pant, by the way, is a form of redundancy. You should say jeans or pants. But the jean versus jeans and the is versus are or is versus am is what is the concord error. Okay? So if your subject is singular, guys, your verb, and specifically often the helping verb, also has to be singular. So we can't say I are wearing a pant. We have to say I am wearing a pair of pants. So it's all about marrying your subject and your verb. And sometimes it's got to do with whether the verb ends in S or not. If there's no auxiliary verb that needs fixing when you read the sentence, then it's got to do with adding or taking away an S. I comes out of my shell. I come out of my shell. Got to remove the S. That was in your trial paper. I'll leave it to you to revise in your survival guide, but let's go and look for the broken English in this sentence. You're helping to create jobs. 1 in 10 jobs on the planet are in the travel and tourism industry. 1 in 10 jobs. 1 is singular. The primary subject of that sentence is singular. And with singular goes the helping verb is. 1 in 10 jobs is in the travel and tourism industry. Not 1 in 10 jobs are. 1 in 10 jobs is. Okay, so fix the auxiliary verb so that it's not broken English. That is the most basic way I can explain concord to you. Fix the helping verb so that the sentence is not broken English. I am wearing pants, not I are wearing pants. Fix the broken English between subject and verb. If you're only getting 45 for English right now, block your ears. But if you're getting 60 or more, when it comes to that specific concord error, I want you to go and learn your rules around plural verbs. Sometimes subjects get disguised as plurals, even though they are not. And that's where the concord error comes in. And if you can go and learn that rule, then you're on your way to 60, 70, 80%. Right. Ma'am is really struggling to make eye contact with the camera at this stage. I am not from your generation and I don't like having the camera on me. So let's finish up. When we talk about a dash, the dash is the hyphen's longer cousin. But in the exam, you're never going to tell me that the dash is longer than the hyphen. You're going to tell me that a dash is to add additional information. That's the primary purpose of a dash in terms of punctuation. It's to add in additional information. And so what they've done here is they've misused a dash. It says replace the dash with a suitable conjunction without changing the meaning of the sentence. Okay, so there is the dash. It's not technically correct to use a dash there. It would be more correct to join the independent clauses with a suitable conjunction. A conjunction, you know from grade 4, guys, it's a joining word. So you've got to take away the line and put in a joining word. You're helping to create jobs. 1 in 10 jobs on the planet are in the travel and tourism industry. What is a suitable conjunction for us to use there? because you're creating jobs because 1 in 10 jobs on the planet are in the travel and tourism industry. Since, as, go and throw in a suitable conjunction. Note that these two sentences are linked, okay? They are linked, and so you need to use something like because or since. You can't just use and, okay? All right, because the two concepts are linked. If you want more information, if you want more marks on this idea of concepts being linked, on this idea that sentences that are independent clauses shouldn't be joined with dashes or commas, go and look up the comma splice error. Comma splice error is when we use a comma or a dash and it's not strong enough and we need to replace it with a conjunction. All right? Conjunctions are also really important when you get that common question about whether the sentence is simple or complex or compound. That's that's 60% fruit that you can go and study. And then the last low-hanging fruit I want to discuss for today is the split infinitive. Just like I really appealed to you to go and study the rules of Concord, as we finish this presentation, you've got 10 minutes left to get to an hour of studying. Please do